What's up, everybody? I figure I could start doing more of my opinion videos. I been working on a website and doing a lot of stuff with photographic art and everything, so I've been kind of not liking mixing the business with politics, but now I got everything set up and everything's all on separate pages. So now I got my personal page back and I got a page set up specifically for PD Gone Mad Arts and got its own YouTube channel now, so I don't have to mix everything. And it's one of the things I find ironic about, like, movie stars. Take Alec Baldwin, for example. I mean, if I was like some of these political type people, I wouldn't be able to watch anything with that guy. I mean, I'm probably one of his biggest fans, but I cannot stand the man's politics. But, I'm probably one of his biggest fans. There's a lot of people whose, politics I don't agree with, but I still respect their art. I mean, Stephen King, one of my favorite authors. And there's very little that we agree on eye to eye. I'm sure there's a lot of other people like that too if I sat here and thought about it. But now that I got my personal YouTube channel back to being my personal YouTube channel, um, I'm working my way out of trucking. I mean, I really planned on retiring from trucking. I didn't plan on early retirement for trucking. I actually planned on a retirement from trucking. But, I'm going to do a few videos because I don't want to make these videos long. So I'm going to do a few videos over time here and talk about different elements of what's going on with this, because there's just so many issues, and it's not, some of them are apparent, but some of them, people are pointing to the issues, but they're not pointing at the causes of the issues, because the causes and the issues are very different. For example, we got these ELDs. That's what I'm going to talk about with this is, the problems that these ELDs are causing for us as truck drivers. There's a reason why, since the ELD mandate has come into play, truck driver deaths are up 42%. Prior to the ELD mandate, trucking is the safest it's ever been in history. I mean, for my I've been driving now going on 12 years. For my first 10 years, I drove in the safest period in the history of trucking. Most of the time I was on electronic logs, but I was also most of the time, working with bigger companies where, I was still doing what I needed to do, which, I'm going to do a whole video on that about the issue with schedules, because there's a big problem there with that. And I'm not going to get into that now, but there's a big problem with that too, with the way our loads are scheduled. But I used to be able to just schedule my delivery times for this. Here's the first company I've ever dealt with where I really have very little control over scheduling my delivery times, and it's just running me into the ground because I'm stuck working around this electronic log. But the thing is, for the first 2 years with this company, it wasn't an issue, because I'm going to be honest, what I was doing and what my logs were doing weren't exactly the same. But I was always driving safely. I was always driving rested. That was my biggest thing. I wanted to be driving rested. That meant that, I had some days where, I'd drive 5 hours. I'd rest for 5 or 6 hours. Then I'd drive another 5 hours. So, I had some days where, I'd be working, some days I'd even be working, 17, 18-hour days realistically, but I was always fresh while I was driving. And the government says they give us this split sleeper berth rule. The split sleeper berth rule it's just a big, if the government really cared about safety, they would let us use that split sleeper berth at least once a day. They would let us use that split sleeper berth the way we feel fit to use it, because it means that we are using it to rest. For example, like I said, some days, I would drive 5 hours, and then, maybe I'd stop somewhere, I'd take a shower, get something to eat, take a nap, and it could be 5 or 6 hours. And then, I'm all fresh and I'm ready to go and I'm back on the road, and I drive another 5 or 6 hours. I got 11 hours a day. So depending on how many hours I drove at the beginning would depend on how many I drove on that second half. But I never drove tired. I was rarely stressed out. Even with everything that's going on in my life, I was rarely stressed out. I was dealing with all the issues in my personal life very well. I was always relaxed. I was never hungry. I was never tired. I always slept well. I was in great health. Now I have to drive not safely, but regulatorily. Meaning I have to put safety over here and just follow the regulations. Because the only way I can make the same money that I was making when I was driving safely is to push the regulations and stick to the regulations 100% and get every minute out of myself that I can within them regulations. And it's just running me into the ground. In the last year, I feel like I've aged 10 years in just a year. And it's all because of this ELD. I'm not really against the ELD itself. I'm against the fact that the regulations will not allow me to drive safely anymore, and the ELD is forcing me to not drive safely anymore. I want to drive safely. I mean, nobody gets behind the wheel of this truck. Well, most people, no matter where you go, there's always that small percentage. You got a small percentage of cops that are just bad cops. You got a small percentage of doctors that are just bad doctors. You got a small percentage of truck drivers that are just bad truck drivers. You got a small percent of politicians that are just good politicians. I mean, we know what the norm is, and we know what we expect, but there's always that small percentage out there. Yeah, I meant exactly what I said about the politicians, by the way. But the way the politicians sell this to the public and the reality are two very different things. Because the regulations have nothing, maybe the original set of regulations had to do with safety, because you can see it when you look at the original regulations. You can see where all the safety was actually thought of in that. But the modern regulations have nothing at all to do with safety. They have all to do with what the lobbyist group known as the ATA is going to Washington and demanding for these big mega carriers, so these big mega carriers can squeeze the most out of their drivers and use government regulations as an excuse to keep their drivers out away from home for weeks at a time, months at a time, and make sure that they can't afford to be able to go home for the way I normally do. Right now I'm on a different type of scheduling, but that's because of personal, not because of anything to do with the people I'm working with. But the way I normally did was I get 1 day off, and then I get 1 day off for every week that I'm out. That means if I'm out 2 weeks, I got 3 days off. If I'm out 3 weeks. I got 4 days off. I usually stayed out 4 weeks at a time and went home 5 days. Which meant that realistically, I only made three paychecks a month after that first month. That first month, I was out all 4 weeks, but then after that, I always made three paychecks a month, but I was able to balance everything until, another government body got involved with my life and just decided, well, I'm not even going to get into that story. But, so I used to be relaxed and I always drove safely, and now the only way for me to make the same money and to be able to do what this other government body is demanding of me that was never realistic even in the first place is now, I'm out here for months at a time. Last time I was home 4 days. I worked from December 26th to August 27th, I think it was, or August 17th, straight through, without a single day off. And I got to go home 4 days. That's how many days I was able to afford to go home because of a government body. But the thing is, on top of that, to add insult to that injury, is the fact that I had to literally run myself into the ground, and I'm still taking a pay cut. I'm working 3, maybe 4 times harder than I was before. My blood pressure, I'm worried about my next physical. I'm worried they're going to pull my medical card because I might not be able to pass the physical because of what the regulations are doing to me. I can't do my job safely. I can't relax. I can't sleep. I can't eat. All I can do is run like the machine that the government says this is how you have to run. Like I said, if they would, like just that split sleeper berth, people don't understand just that one rule. If, the two rules that I think the one rule that they need to do totally away with is the 70-hour rule. The 70-hour rule makes absolutely no sense when you're an over-the-road truck driver. The reason why is because it takes about 120 hours to go from the East Coast to the West Coast and back. That's 2 weeks. There's no reason why you should have to take a day off out on the road instead of just being able to go out to California. You drop your load, you spend a day piddling around out there. You're not going to be working hard that day when you drop your load and you're piddling around, especially with like what I do because I run reefer. So I'm usually going to 2 or 3 stops. So I'm only piddling around that day. So that day is actually pretty relaxing. And then I can run back to Florida. That would mean I've been out 2 weeks. I could go home 3 days and I could do it again. Because the government is doing exactly what the lobbying group for these big mega corporations, it's known as the ATA, is doing exactly what they want. The government doesn't allow me to have my days off at home. I don't relax when I'm off out here. It's not even really a day off. I'm working. I'm sitting in a truck. I don't relax. I relax when I'm home. When I'm in the truck, I'm not really relaxing. Like I said, I at least had it at that one point when I was driving by the calculator. I was always rested and fresh. And even though I wasn't relaxed, I wasn't stressed. And when I got home, I actually got home and took all my days off at home. And so it was, by the time I got back out on the road, I was refreshed, I was relaxed, I was ready to go. Do it 4 weeks again, go home, get it all out, get ready to go, hit the road, and it was great. And that's the way it should be. And I was doing my job safely. I really don't feel I'm doing my job safely anymore. And the irony is I'm doing exactly what the government says I have to do if I want to make my paycheck the way I was. So I'm doing exactly what the government says I have to do. And I personally do not feel I am running safely anymore. But I am running 100% per government regulation. And, it's something that the public needs to know, because the politicians have lied to the public to sell this whole thing that this all has to do with safety. It has nothing to do with safety. Because if it did, I should feel like I'm running safer. I should feel like I'm running safer. And I do not. And so, that's one major issue. I'm going to talk about a couple more of these. I'm just going to do them separately. I don't want this to go too long. I want to keep them all within 15 to 20 minutes. But that is a major issue with what's going on out here right now. And the fact that since the ELD mandate has gone into effect, and coinciding with it, running perfectly side by side, as the ELDs are getting more and more enforced, driver deaths are going up and up, and they're running perfectly side by side, it's obvious the regulations are not working. And like I said, when the way I used to do it, I feel that for 2 years, that my first 2 years here are, even though for my whole first 10 years of my career, I've always driven in the safest decade in trucking in history, the 2 years prior to the ELD mandate going into effect are probably the safest I've ever been in my whole driving career, because I was able to drive exactly the way I needed to always be driving safely. I was always awake. I was always refreshed. I was never stressed. I was able to eat properly. I was able to relax when I needed to. I didn't have to. I got a 75 mile an hour truck, and most of the time I wasn't even doing 70 miles an hour. Now I gotta push my truck as much as I can. When I'm in the 70, I push my 5 mile an hour cushion. Whatever speed I'm in, I push that 5 mile an hour cushion. I mean, I'm doing everything I can, because it's the only way for me to maintain a living wage and be in the regulations, is to stand by the regulations 100%. And it's literally killing me. And like I said, I don't know if I'm going to pass my next DOT physical because of these regulations. I mean, in 2 years' time, I went from, minus my teeth, I have soft enamel, so minus my teeth, for 2 years, I was the epitome of health. I was exactly what you'd want to find in somebody in their mid-40s. I mean, I was actually healthier than most people in their mid-40s. I was doctors were always impressed. And I might fail my next DOT physical just because of the stress. And my career will be ruined. Because once they pull my DOT medical card, I can't drive a truck. And it has nothing to do with the only thing that changed is that ELD mandate forcing me to run per government regulations and not safely. I'm just not allowed to run safely anymore. And it's killing me, and it's stressing me out, and it's just a nightmare. And the data's out. 42% more driver deaths, up 42%. Driver crashes, or everything around this industry when it comes to safety, all the numbers are in the negative. They're all backwards of what the government said they would be because of this mandate, because nobody's allowed to do our jobs. We're not allowed to do our jobs safely anymore. And it's an issue that needs to be addressed, because, the industry can't afford to lose more drivers like me. I mean, drivers are just bleeding out of it. They're not even bleeding out of this. I mean, it's like they just cut the artery and they just they're pouring out. Drivers are just leaving the industry because nobody wants to go to prison for the rest of their life, because the only way they can do their job safely is to violate the regulations blatantly. And if they have an accident while violating the regulations blatantly, I mean, you could wind up in prison for the rest of your life. And so they're just walking away from it because the government refuses to allow us to do our job safely anymore. Not that we don't want to do our job safely. The government refuses to allow us to do our job safely. And it's a major, major issue.